Okay, everybody, I'd like to welcome you back to another episode here on BizWestMichigan. Very excited. Today we've got Matthew Kushinka. He is the principal of RedLine Language Services. Now, Matthew has been using language professionally for 9 years, and we'll learn what that means later, working as a copy editor and a proofreader in publishing, as a language teacher, a translator, and he's even worked for the FBI. So he is a member of the American Translators Association and the National Language Service Corps, and his company, RedLine Language Services, is a member of the Grand Rapids Chamber of Commerce. Matthew is a graduate of Penn State University, and he has done his graduate studies at the Monterey Institute of International Studies in Monterey, California, which is actually one of the premier language universities in the country and in the world. And he lives in Northeast Grand Rapids with Sarah, his wife, and their 1-year-old son. So, Matthew, without further ado, welcome.
Thanks very much, Rob. I'm happy to be here.
You're welcome. So, you and I just met, and I'm pretty excited because, anytime you get a chance to talk with somebody that knows multiple languages, I'm always really impressed by that because I can barely speak English. So, why don't you just kind of start out, give us kind of a high-level overview of your business, maybe what people can expect and possibly how they could use RedLine.
Right. Well, RedLine Language Services is a company that ensures that the language in our clients' documents is professional and is ready for publication, whether that language needs to be created from scratch, whether that language needs to be edited, or whether that language needs to be translated from one language to another.
Okay.
So, go ahead.
What all types of languages does RedLine do? I know that you're one of those crazy proficient people in French. Do you guys do other languages? Do you just focus primarily on Romantics, or?
We do. If we're talking just about translation, and of course the clients could be American or they could be elsewhere in the world, for that we offer really up to about 8 or 9 languages. The standard Western European languages, Spanish, German, French. We've done Italian and Portuguese. Okay. Asian languages, we're in the middle of a Chinese project right now. Korean, Japanese, Arabic.
Wow, that's a lot.
I typically, though, like to include English as one of those languages in the language pair, and that's really for quality control. If I can't read or understand either the source text or the target text, then that's a problem.
Right. And I'm gonna let everybody know, as if you've been watching BizWestMichigan, obviously I get some video issues here. So if I freeze, that's my fault. I'm not playing Godzilla or anything like that. So that's really cool. And I know that especially as the economy and business, especially in West Michigan, goes more global, one of the biggest concerns that I know of people that I get to work with is, is it going to translate well? Is it going to translate appropriately? And am I going to do anything that is really bad with what my language is?
Right.
I had a funny story. When I was working for a company here in West Michigan called SignComp. We did a lot of business in Canada, and I was in charge of a lot of the marketing and creating a bunch of the ads, and I had basically come up with a slogan that we help you save labor on your manufacturing. And the translation, when the distributor translated it for us, is we help you get rid of your workers.
not exactly the message you want to communicate.
No, I was not very popular in French-speaking Canada. Trust me. We just got absolutely pummeled with that one. It was funny because here we are Americans and we're selling this product up in Canada, and we had some major Canadian competitors. So one of our competitors actually cut out the ad, framed it, and sent it to me as a thank you for increasing their business. Not what you want to do.
No, definitely not.
So,
but there are ways to avoid that, and what you bring up is a common problem. It's something that, something that comes up in the translation industry all the time. But there are ways to avoid it, and the two easiest ways are to make sure that the source language, in your case English, is as clear as possible, so that the translator who is native in another language can understand the English 100%. And the second way then is really just to how do I put this? To make sure that you have a native speaker translating into the target language. And this doesn't always happen. It seems obvious for a lot of us in the industry, but there are vendors who use non-native translators to convert a document, and that's not the way to go if you're looking for quality.
Right. And you can see that pretty easily. I mean, especially as you're looking at stuff on the internet, if you're doing any kind of content search or whatever, that's really one of the. I'm assuming that's probably one of the main areas that you guys work on right now is translating content for the internet.
Correct. Websites, newsletters, sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's one of the ways that, in my opinion, and I'm somewhat biased, obviously, but as I look at companies, as I read content from other companies' websites and whatever. You can tell the truly professional groups from, I don't want to call them hacks, but I will, is if it's properly translated, if it looks good. I mean, you can spot it a mile away if somebody's not native because their translations are...
Exactly. And some of that is a function of size. I generally find that the companies with the resources to hire either a full-time marketing professional or an entire marketing staff, or even part-time marketing staff, generally have better copy and better translations than those that don't. If you're a small business owner and you're working on a shoestring budget, are you really going to spend thousands and thousands to make sure that your website is properly translated into Spanish? I would say that you should, but that doesn't always happen.
Right. So maybe if you could just maybe share with us maybe who a few of your customers are.
Sure.
Maybe get an idea of some of the types of companies that you work with that you can work with.
Sure. We did a translation project for a local market research firm. They had some video content in French and Italian, and they needed text documents, or documents, I should say, in English and Spanish. And they were hoping to get a transcription first in French and Italian, and then translate that into English and Spanish. And we were able to tell them, look, if you don't really need the transcriptions in the source languages, let's just go right to the translation. And we were able to save them some cash that way. So that's one example of a company. I do some work for individual authors who are writing manuscripts. This is all on the nonfiction side. Okay, we're in the middle of a Chinese translation project right now. I think I'd mentioned that. We're doing a test development project for Michigan State University. It's an English language proficiency test for foreign students.
Wow!
So it's sort of in the ESL realm, English as a second language. Okay. We do a lot of work for a client in Washington, D.C., whose end client is the Department of Defense. And again, that's for language proficiency testing.
Right.
So it really runs the gamut. It really just depends on the client and their size, their needs, and so
on. You brought up the translation for publishers, and that's actually one of the subjects that came up. I got to speak at the CEO conference, or the CEO summit down in Phoenix a few weeks ago, and obviously I've got my book, the Simple Focus Plan, and the other ones, and one of the topics that came up was, was I planning on translating my book? Mm-hmm. And it was funny because it was kind of serendipitous that you and I connected, we just had that conversation, and my book is, the crazy part is it's sold on. I've sold copies and done programs on 13 countries,
right.
But it's only in English so far.
Right.
So you and I need to talk about that.
Sure, sure, I'd be happy to.
But as people are looking at this, I mean, obviously, nobody really. I'm going to make an assumption here, and correct me if I'm wrong, but is translation usually the last thing that people think of when they're doing projects like this?
It depends on who the client is and where that client is based. I'll give you an example. European clients, because of how they grow up, the languages that they encounter while they're growing up, while they're in school, the proximity to other countries, Europeans are very, very, very familiar with translation as a concept, as an industry. They know that even now with the EU and its sort of political, the ease with which you can move from one country to the next and work without even having to get any special paperwork, people know that there are other languages out there, and translation is a service that many European clients use and are familiar with. That's not the case for many American clients. English is still a dominant, if not the dominant language in the world. America is still a mighty superpower economically, even though we just had this little recession. And so what that does, and also because of the size of our country geographically, there are a lot of factors that contribute to Americans not necessarily needing or even thinking about translation. Now, I will tell you that the clients who do recognize that there is an entire market out there made up of literally billions of people, the clients who realize that are, I think, really giving themselves a leg up on the competition, because as soon as you translate your English content into Spanish, let's say, you can now sell your products in Argentina, in Chile, in Mexico, in Central America, in Peru, in Bolivia, right? All of a sudden, your potential customers, the number of your potential customers just increases almost exponentially.
Right, and that's one of the things that I know that, again, I'll use SignComp as an example. That's one of the reasons that they were successful as they were, is, he went over there, and I say he, it's Tom Breihoff, who's now the owner and I think CEO.
Excuse me.
So they spent a lot of money getting their materials, their videos, their instruction sheets, all that kind of stuff. They got it all translated, and they had it done professionally. And so when they went to other areas, it was kind of a non-issue. It really didn't matter. So, I think that that's one of the things that, a lot of companies, especially as you look at the companies that are in West Michigan. I mean, we've got a lot of really premier B2B type companies. You've got, obviously the big guys. You got Steelcase and Herman Miller and Amway and those guys. But there's all the secondary companies that are really, market leaders. They're very successful. They're doing all kinds of interesting things. And the global space is really where a lot of their growth is going to be. And it, just some simple, I don't want to say simple translation, but taking the approach of really translating their materials professionally would make a big difference. So
Now, I would also mention that I wouldn't recommend to every client just to translate into 5 separate languages just for the sake of translating. Obviously, they would need to have a strategy in place for entering the Spanish-speaking market, for entering the French-speaking market. Geographically, where are they going? If it's French-speaking, are they going to France and Belgium and Luxembourg? Are they going to Switzerland? Are they going to French-speaking Canada? The language variant is different. Are they going to West Africa? So, if the company knows all of that and has a plan in place, then I say, okay, let's talk about what your translation needs are.
Well, that's a great point to bring up, because I know that one of my friends, their company just decided that they were going to go to China. His dad was like, okay, we've got to go to China. We've got to go to China. And they so they went and paid actually a huge amount of money, because they're a manufacturing company, fairly technical product. One of their users manuals, if I remember correctly, was 500 plus pages. They got it all translated, and his dad goes, okay, now we can go get customers. And it was, and they're like, well, shouldn't we have done that first and then translated on the back end to make sure? And the unfortunate part was, now that was about 4 years ago, and it took them probably 6 to 8 months to get everything translated, to get it all done well. Everything was approved. They're over in the Detroit market, and I think they just now got their first Chinese customer. So they spent all that money up front. Now the good news is it was done, and it was not a barrier to doing business. But so I think that's a really good point. Why don't you tell us maybe a little bit about, because why don't we learn how long has RedLine been around?
RedLine just celebrated its 1-year anniversary 2 days ago. So we're a very new company. Now, as I say, I've been in the industry for about 8 or 9 years, but RedLine as an entity really only came into being last year in April.
Which is pretty impressive. If you listen to, we asked you what kind of businesses, what kind of projects you guys had going. Sounds like you guys are off to a rocking start. And it's organizations like RedLine, in my opinion, that are going to help the overall business community in West Michigan. So, that's why when you and I connected to do the interview, I kind of lunged at it. Like, whoa, I just sent you that email. So as we're going forward, looking at you guys being around for 1 year, and by the way, congratulations. And so
thank you.
It sounds like you started your business about the same time your son was born.
Yes.
That only was probably just a little stressful.
Which I wouldn't necessarily recommend everyone. It was a challenge. It really was. But luckily, I had the support of my wife, and she's wonderful, and everything that we worked towards was, look, can we make this happen, and can we make this happen within a certain time frame? New business owners will relate to the story that I will tell, and that is that it's not as simple as hanging a shingle out, putting up a website, and registering your business as a sole proprietorship or an LLC or a partnership or whatever, right? It's just not that easy. You also have to get customers.
Yeah, that whole customer part is usually where everything kind of goes stop, and it's like, yeah, that whole money thing.
Exactly. So, but no, in general, I've been very, very happy with how things have gone, since the company began. Now, I will tell you that I didn't quite start from scratch because, of course, I had contacts within the industry, whether it was people I went to grad school with, whether it was former clients in the freelance world. And so a lot of those connections helped me as I started the business. So it's not as if I started with 0 clients.
Right.
It was essentially saying, look, I've been doing this on a freelance basis for a number of years. Why don't I put this under a company name, under one roof, one umbrella, right? And say this is the category, language services, and I'll offer the following sub-services to clients.
Well, if you maybe, and there's a lot of people I know that are watching BizWestMichigan that have been communicating with me that are either contemplating startup, they're in startup mode.
Sure.
I've got obviously my regular 9 to 5, if you want to call it that, if there's any such thing anymore, is with Superior Business Solutions here in Grand Rapids. But I'm in startup mode for multiple companies. We've got Deborah and I started BizWestMichigan under Biz360. I've got Strategy Simple, where I'm helping companies with lead generation, and I've got my publishing arm under that. But then I've also got some other things that I've got started that I can't even talk about yet because my investors have asked me not to. So.
Do you ever get to sleep, Rob, or not?
Not according to my wife, not enough. And she's like, I get more irritable, or when I, last night I was working on stuff, probably till 1:30, 2 o'clock, and woke up this morning and was up and out and rolling by, it was still dark.
Right.
So it is what it is.
Well, you had me beat. I was up only till midnight. So.
So with you being in startup mode, what are some of the challenges you've had to overcome? What are some of the problems you've had?
Right. Well, I think the first one, and probably the most obvious, it won't surprise anyone, is one of funding. Okay, you're a small business, you're a sole proprietor. I may have subcontractors, and I may hire a consultant part time, but I don't run a ship with 50 employees with $1 million budget, right? So a lot of it was just looking at, okay, what do I have? What are the resources, and what can I do with those resources within X amount of time? So it's been very, it was really an exercise of decision making. Okay, what judicious decisions can I make so that I'm going to set myself up for either business in the future or some very doable client contact right now, some very doable business right now with the resources that we have. And luckily, I was able to do that, and RedLine has been, I think I can safely say we haven't ever bitten off more than we can chew.
That's good, and that's one of the critical things that over the past 12 years. Gosh, 12 years already, that I've been working, as a consultant and as a strategist and helping people with their planning and strategic plans. One of the biggest challenges is just, going too big and have, shooting too high,
sure.
and not having the structure in place. Now,
sure.
I'm a firm believer in, ready, fire, aim to some degree, just to, don't sit and wait for something to happen, because something will happen. It won't be what you wanted. But kind of a controlled growth and really monitoring what's going on there. So,
I was going to say, as an example too, I actually got a call a few months ago from a gentleman who works for a firm that hooks up vendors with the federal government and gets them federal contracts, or at least helps them with the application process. It's this 300-page document. Really, I think it's a $10,000 application fee. It's really an extensive project. But of course, you can end up landing millions of dollars of contracts from the federal government if you get that kind of work. And we started talking about how long I've been in business, my revenues and so on. And he said, well, you know what? Let's talk again in a year or two, because truthfully, they're looking for people with millions of dollars in revenue. And while I wish I could say that RedLine had $1 million in the bank right now, it's just not the case. We're a new company.
Right. And that's one of the things, though, too, that if you were to jump in there, and like you said, you've got to monitor and manage your growth. So if you were to do that contract, you were to spend the money, which could you if you really had to, I could guarantee you that you could come up with $10,000 to get that done,
to get
the application done. But what's really even scarier though is what if you get it? What if
Oh,
you get a
exactly,
big
exactly.
contract?
And that's it. And that's what I said to my wife. I said, it's not the application fee that's the issue. The issue is, what if we get
Exactly.
you know,
And I've
1.5
seen
billion in
companies that have done
contracts?
it.
There would be a massive ramp up that we'd have to do. The subcontractor network that I have already would have to be expanded by about tenfold.
Right.
I currently use about 20, 25 different people that I can call on for different projects.
Right.
But that, as I say, would require a significant ramp up. So I'm, like all business owners, I'm interested in growth. I want to increase revenues. Nothing could be, it's only that, yes. But I want it to be done in sort of a planned, I don't want to say a calculated way, but a comfortable way, a way that I know I can assure a certain level of quality. Because at the end of the day, if my product, in this case our deliverables, if those deliverables are not high quality, if they're not professional, then what's the point of even doing it? So I'd rather concentrate on quality first, keep the batches small or medium size, and then down the road, as we can handle the extra capacity, then we go for it.
Right.
The flip side of that, and one of the real positives to being on the smaller side is that I think we're able to build a rapport and sort of a level of trust with our clients that I don't think they necessarily get from the bigger companies. There are translation agencies, for example, that have websites where you can simply upload your document and you never actually talk to a human. It just goes into a queue. The word count is evaluated, right? The price is given by email, and the next thing you know, you've got your document sent back to you. And while there are certain efficiencies there, I actually like being able to talk to my clients and ask them, what do you need? How can we actually help you? Because it often happens where that a client will tell me, look, I want X and Y, and I tell them, look, what you actually want is just X. We can save you money, and you'll have the same end result. So that kind of connection, I think, is important. That's not to say that we need to spend hours and hours in meetings. It's just to say that we do need to touch base by phone. We want to have a Skype call if they're international clients, and meet each other, because once they feel more comfortable with me and therefore the company, I think they're more likely to do business with us.
I would agree. So, kind of wrapping up. I mean, again, you've been in business for 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
You've been speaking professionally or using language professionally, which I think is an interesting way to look at it. I've been accused of using language not very professionally in the past, but we'll talk about that another time.
Right.
If you could go back and do one thing differently, what's been your one big mistake, or the one thing that you'd want to change, if you wouldn't mind sharing that with us?
Sure. I think the biggest mistake I made was naively thinking that social media would not play a role or a big role in my company. I thought, I don't need to do Facebook. We don't need a company page for Facebook. I don't need to be really on LinkedIn. I don't need to be active on it. Okay. RedLine doesn't need to be on Twitter, right? And I've really come, I've done a 180 on that, basically, because I have seen firsthand what happens when you do take the time to really develop a presence on, say, LinkedIn or sending out tweets or something like this. I've gotten clients through LinkedIn. They find me through LinkedIn.
Right.
That alone should tell business owners that they need to take social media seriously. Doesn't mean that you have to be updating your Facebook status every 5 seconds. It means that you need to realize that it's a real avenue for visibility, and therefore for business and for growth. I look at various metrics. I look at my website analytics. I look to see how many visitors we've had over the last year. I look to see what, say, for example, the number of my connections is on LinkedIn. Is it growing? Right? Is it staying flat? Is it growing? I look at who begins to start following me on Twitter, and when those things start to happen, all of a sudden you have really I'll call it a pool of interested clients, or if they are not clients themselves, they're at least perhaps able to put you in touch with a prospective client. So there's really no downside to having a real presence on social media. I don't think there is. There's a small time investment, but it's essentially a low cost way to advertise.
Yeah, I would totally agree. And so, question: Did you get your Facebook page updated? There was a major change. It went to Timeline last week. Did you get it done?
Right. So we have a company page that is not live yet because we're still feeding it, but it's created at least, right? We have a company LinkedIn page. We're on Twitter, and of course, all of these you're able to access from the website. We also you'll see those links on newsletters. When I send out a newsletter, it's the same thing. So there are ways, hopefully, for clients and prospective clients, or at least people who are interested in the business, to stay connected and sort of keep tabs on what we're doing.
Cool. And we will definitely have your web address at the bottom of the interview here.
Okay, great.
On the site. And you and I had talked that hopefully pretty soon. It looks like my video is frozen again.
Yeah, I see that.
I look like a bird, which is spring, which is good.
It's fitting.
So we'll definitely have that on there when you get your white paper done or your reports.
Super.
Let's definitely get that on here.
Super.
And if anybody needs anything else, we'll have Matthew's information down below. And look, I'm a ventriloquist. You can't. My mouth isn't moving. So if just so everybody knows, I do have a call with my software guy and my tech guy for camera stuff here fairly soon. So I do have 3 different laptops with 3 different recording softwares. So Matthew, you've been a lot of fun. It's really interesting, and I think that, like I said, companies like RedLine and people like you in the professional community here in West Michigan is just going to make West Michigan even better. So thanks for taking the time to do it. And
Rob, I appreciate it. It was a pleasure. It's always nice to be able to, number one, talk to other people in the business community, and number 2, talk about my business, because it is something that I enjoy and something I'm passionate about. So if I can spread that word, it's always a neat opportunity. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. So everybody, thanks for watching Biz West Michigan, and we'll talk with you soon. Thanks.
Thanks again, Rob.
You bet.
Bye-bye.